We've handed over our food security to someone else, and they're here to help you take it back. It's the Farm to Table Direct Show with Ryan and Keith.
That's not really what I see. I just see that we're slinging names, that we're, that people are calling each other names, and then they just want to silence the other person and demonize the other side, and it's a sad state of affairs.
Right, it gets us nowhere. But you mentioned humans saving humans, I think, or harming humans to save humans, and I think that's kind of our...
Yeah, we're about to get into that.
I think that's kind of what is a natural... It's came out of this theory. It's came out of, of this thought process, and it's driving into climate change and other things. And I think we'll see that here in a minute. And I'll let you go ahead and hit on that and take the lead on that.
Yeah, what I want to do is I want to start out, and again, I'll just kind of reiterate, what harming humans to save humans means is that, how drastic are the people who, and again, I keep using this word over and over again, perpetrate this upon us. How far are they willing to take this in order to save us? And so I just want to compare and contrast the two, and then like I say, I'll let you guys be the judge,
right?
But so the first thing I want to get into is where John Kerry has come out, and he puts natural gas producers on notice. Now, that happened here a couple of weeks ago. It's not new information or anything. But what I think it does is it illustrates that, when we should be focusing on not the population, but the crisis, the supply chain crisis, we don't need to be putting natural gas, the thing that can help us get out of a crisis, on notice.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Kind of self-destructive, you might say.
Yeah, it's definitely self-destructive. And anyway, I'm just going to share a little something on that article. To where, what he actually said in there is, we have to put the industry on notice. You've got 6 years, 8 years, no more than 10 years or so, within which you've got to come up with the means by which you're going to capture emissions. And if you're not capturing them, we have to deploy alternative sources of energy. And this is something that he told Bloomberg. And I just might remind you that it is natural gas that is one of the key ingredients in producing the fertilizer that our farmers use. Okay, and so why are we putting them on notice right now during this crisis that we're in? We have a food shortage crisis. They're not producing millions of acres of land, and we're putting one of the very ingredients in fertilizer.
Right.
So here it is. Again, I'll ask that question, and just to bring it to everybody, to the top of everybody's mind, how far are these people willing to go in order to implement these ideas on the population? And here we can see it. And one of the things that you can say here is that, if you understand how markets work, you've got speculators that's speculating in all commodities. So let's just play this out for just a minute. He comes out and he makes this insane statement about putting them on notice. Well, the people who are speculating and betting on stuff are the ones that set the prices. They say, oh, wait a minute. So you mean in the next 5, 8, or 6, 8, no more than 10 years, the supply is going to go down of natural gas? Well, Now we've got a scarcity situation. Right. And in that scarcity situation, they're going to jack the prices up.
Oh, well, of course.
That's the way it works.
That's always happened. Now, I'll give credit to the Wall Street Journal. And like I said, they nailed him down on this. And this goes to what you were saying, to what he said. And it's you said insane. Yeah. So, and it is. It's ridiculous. For one, carbon capture and sequestration technology is still in its infancy.
That's correct.
The methods that are currently under development are far from scalable to anywhere near the levels required to handle the total volume of natural gas used in America each year. And even if you could get it up and running in some locations, it drives the cost of the finished product significantly.
Right. That's exactly right. We're just simply not there yet, folks. We're not there technology-wise to be able to basically destroy oil, fossil fuels, which is the power. It's what powers this economic engine, and yet that's exactly what they're attacking. But anyway, I digress. Let's go on with...
I'm going to hit this, just one thing, right before we jump off of this.
Sure.
With no natural gas available by 2032, because that's what he just said. 10 years.
Right.
No natural gas available.
To the outside, by the way.
Yeah. How do you plan to convert half of the buildings in the country to electric heating in 10 years? And who's going to pay for those conversions? And where will you generate all of the electricity if you've knocked 40% of the current juice off our grid?
I don't know what kind of fuzzy math that is, but it ain't the kind of math I learned.
We used to call that beer math.
Beer math. Yeah. Okay, I'll buy that.
That's what we used to call it, beer math.
Yeah. And so, you're absolutely right. So, I mean, is there any wonder that we're in a fertilizer crisis, right now, or food shortage crisis?
Well,
there's no wonder that we're facing those things. And they don't seem to be really serious about solving that problem, I think, because it's useful.
It's convenient for their needs.
It's useful.
It's useful.
Right.
So, could they be? Yeah. I don't know. Anyway.
Right. So, I'll just move on to a different
there. Sorry,
article.
Folks. We kind of hit one of those natural things where it's like, we're not sure what we're going to say next.
Natural things on natural gas.
That's it.
Okay. And so, one of the questions is, are they weaponizing science? We got to trust the science. Or did they find a way that they could actually use science to achieve some type of an objective, right?
Well, I mean, we can go back to January of 2020 and everything that's happened since and kind of make some conclusions about trusting science.
Right. So I've got a little bit of a piece, and I'm only going to share a piece of it.
Okay.
Because I don't want to waste all of our time watching it. Although I think it's very well worth watching, and it's from Daniel Henninger from the Wall Street Journal. A little video here, and we're going to share that with you real quick.
The only thing the public's been fully immunized against is what they're being told by the voices of public authority.
We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
Well, that's not true. We have not had 100,000 children in serious condition in U.S. hospitals. According to the CDC,
COVID pandemic is changing many behavioral patterns, but one of the biggest, for which we should thank the virus, is the death of official certitude.
When should I get tested? Why can't I find a test? Do I need to isolate 10 days, 5 days, or even at all?
The way this administration rolled out boosters was a disaster. You created skepticism and mass confusion.
By now, the public has been left numb, with few believing what politicians or the CDC say about COVID and Omicron. The answers they give no longer add up.
Do you know how many of the 836,000 deaths in the U.S. linked to COVID are from COVID, or how many are with COVID, but they had other comorbidities? Do you have that breakdown?
I've asked that.
Those data will be forthcoming.
My purpose isn't to discredit public authority or science. We need both. It was public authorities who cleared the regulatory path for Operation Warp Speed, which let private sector scientists develop protective vaccines.
No political interference, no bureaucracy, no red tape. It's been just an incredible, visionary approach.
My intention is to resurrect the idea of intellectual modesty, a necessary virtue that looks altogether lost to public life and its scientific representatives.
What happened during this pandemic is that many politicians outsourced their responsibility to the public to public health people.
Right.
Including Donald Trump.
Including Donald Trump.
Yep.
And the consequence of that is that the normal checks that would allow you to say, well, the politician made a good choice or not, have been offloaded to a set of people who have no checks at all.
The weaponization of science accelerated with the arrival of COVID, but it began with the battle over climate policy.
Climate legislation is infrastructure legislation.
Disputes among scientists can be intense, but at some point in the last decade, the impatient proponents of climate change enlisted the media to suppress dissent.
You're an expert on modeling, scientific modeling, and of course the models are what drive a lot of the predictions. How credible do you think those models are, and how much uncertainty exists in those models?
There's a lot of uncertainty in the models, and unfortunately, the uncertainty is growing as the models become more sophisticated with each generation.
Social media companies such as Facebook have tried to suppress the objections of scientists and authors like Stephen Koonin. But dissent, perhaps the most honorable of political traditions, is being demoted into oblivion as, quote, misinformation.
There's a reason why it's called COP26. There's been 25 of them before that. We've actually been doing this charade, if you will, for 30 years now. And the UN did a surprisingly honest appraisal of the last decade of climate impacts. What they said was, despite we've had the Paris Agreement and we've had 10 years of talks, we can't tell the difference between the world we're actually in and a world where we hadn't done anything about climate since 2005.
So we're just going to cut it off there. I think we get the gist of that. But one of the things that he pointed out is that they have shut down dissent.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
You know, in other words, we're not allowed to speak up against it at all.
Well, right. You know, a dissenting opinion or a dissenting, or we've talked about, cancel culture and trying to shame and discredit actual credible people just because they disagree with the trend or the narrative or whatever. I mean, they just, they're either blocked from being able to get out there or they're mocked or, their credentials are brought in. But, one of the important things there that I thought it was really important early on in that was the fact that the people who we elected to do these things, to be the voice for us, obfuscated their duties and their oath and their responsibility to unelected bureaucrats and so-called health officials. Now, something we've seen with Ehrlich and we've seen with Fauci and we've seen with a lot of them is once they draw a line, they refuse to back up because they couldn't possibly be wrong.
Right. They're kind of more like autocrats.
Right. And so I think that's where we've seen there. But yeah, the dissent is gone
allowance,
the allowance. The dissent's there.
But plenty of dissent is there. But
the allowance. And I mean, look what has happened to so much of the health profession because of dissent, because they're choosing to not go along with.
Well, they're afraid to. I mean, you go to school for the number of years that you go to become a doctor or an RN or any other of the 2 or 3 letter names, right. And the last thing that you want to do is buck the system because you could be ruining your entire career if you don't do what they said.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you were kind of like, I could dissent.
Right.
But dare I dissent?
Well, right. Do I cut off my money? Do I cut off my
entire
my
life?
Check? Do I change
my whole livelihood, my lifestyle.
Right. And most, sadly, really push come to shove, when it comes down to dollars and cents, that's really where it, you'll find out. But
right.
I mean, I'm not sitting here to judge them. I mean, if I was in their shoes, I might be in a different, I don't know. but I would like to think that I would stand on principles, but, you know, I got to feed my family too.
Right.
And that's the way they look at it is, you know, like you said, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, you know, several years of school.
That's right. They would just completely be throwing their livelihood away.
Because, I mean, it's, you know, and much like we've seen in other things in our society, I mean, they basically can get blacklisted where they're unhireable, you know, and as much as I would like to see the days of the private physician come back and the guy who just had his own little practice out there and he wasn't beholden to Medicare or Medicaid or insurance companies, but, you know, actually beholden to his patients and his customers, his clients, you know. But, you know, I'll digress off of that little soapbox.
Right. I mean,
it's where it leads.
And I would just point out here that, you know, this just shows us that we actually need doctors that have their own practices that are not beholden to a lot of this. And I don't even know in today's society if that's even possible. But, man, I sure would start to go to that guy if he could just be, you know, unbiased according to, you know, his, you know, if I say this, I may lose my license kind of thing.
Right.
You know,
or this supplier or this insurance company or this or government agency will take away, you know, my livelihood because I'm not going to get paid.
Right. Be frank with me, doc. You know, and it's just like, you know, one of the things they talked about is we no longer trust our healthcare providers, and we don't because we see that they're beholden. And I'm not even calling it their fault.
No, it's the beast. I mean, it's the machine.
That's a way to do it. It's the machine that's doing it.
Right. You know, I mean, you know, Skynet's in charge, you know. But
maybe so. So once again, folks, what I'll do is just remind you that we're talking about saving humans or harming humans in order to save them. And so this next video short that I'll show to you is well, that ain't the one. But it was the importance of being ethical with Jordan Peterson. It was under that. And I've learned to like Jordan Peterson quite a lot. I kind of yield to his expertise when it comes to his ability to think.
What I you know, when I watched this, you know, pre-prep, what I really found with him is his frankness, with his direct boldness of what he's going to say.
He has a conviction.
He doesn't say it as a question or as a passive statement. He draws a line and is firm in that, and you can tell there is an utter refusal to shy away from speaking what he feels and believes is a conviction.
Right. And this was an interview that was done by the Hoover Institute of Jordan Peterson. I'll go ahead and play that now.
Incoming freshmen next year, University of Toronto, Stanford University, 18-year-old kids. Coming into this, we've been through 3 years of COVID. I won't rehearse it all. Mm-hmm. One sentence. What would you say to them as they begin university at the age of 18 or 19? What's the restorative, the redemptive sentence? What should they do?
Don't be thinking your ambition is corrupt. You know, because that's part of the message now. Human beings, we're a cancer on the planet. We're headed for an environmental apocalypse. The entire historical structure is nothing but atrocity, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone with any ethical aim whatsoever is just going to pull back. You don't want to manifest any ambition, support the patriarchal structure, exploit the environment. You've got to crush yourself down. You shouldn't even have any children. It's like, no. There's no excuse for that. There's zero excuse for that. I saw a professor at an event, something like this. He came out and trumpeted this bloody, environmentally friendly house he'd built. And, you know, fair enough, man. It was a pretty interesting house. But not everybody had the $4 million that it took him to build it. And I'm not criticizing his money even. It's like, he's had some money. Good for him. He built a house. Okay. But then to trumpet that as a moral virtue, well, you're pushing it there. And then he came out to all the kids and he said, you know, my wife and I decided that we were only going to have one child. And I think that's one of the most ethical things we could have possibly done. And I would strongly encourage you to do the same. I thought, you son of a bitch. You get up in front of these young people. A lot of these kids were children of first-generation immigrants from China. And he showed all these images, of these terrible factories in China, these endless rows of sterile mechanism that were subordinating all the Chinese people to this terrible, capitalist machine. And I thought, you don't understand. Half the audience is looking at those factories and thinking, that's a hell of a lot better than struggling through the mud under Mao, buddy. And so I don't know where he thought he was, but to come out in front of all those kids and basically tell them that the whole human enterprise is so goddamn corrupt that the best thing they could possibly do is limit their multiplication, and to think of himself as a scholar and an educator, it was just, I did say something, by the way. It was rather uncomfortable, and he stomped off the stage. But that's no message for young people. There's no excuse for that. And you think, well, we're going to destroy the planet. We have to do this. We have to demoralize the youth to be ethical. It's like, yeah, really, that's your theory? You're going to demoralize young people to be ethical? That's your theory? It's like, you should go home and think about that for like a year. And I'm passionate about this, because you have no idea how many people that's killing. You have no idea. I see people everywhere, all over the world. They're so demoralized, especially young people, with a conscience, because they've been told since they were little that there's nothing to them but corruption and power. It's like, how the hell do you expect them to react? Well, I shouldn't do anything then,
Dr. Jordan Peterson on what was the phrase? The divine sovereign
individual.
The divine sovereign individual. Thank you. You said something that
the divine sovereign individual.
That's under attack, has been for a long time. It's about the collective.
Right.
I'll give it a little, the Star Trek reference, the Borg, resistance is futile, they say.
Right.
Become a part of the collective, the Borg, not be an individual, not be a free thinker, not have morals, not have values of your own or values of your own belief beyond that what the collective says you should value.
And that's a shame.
I
mean, I think that, I know that in the past I've heard where, like, the late great Rush Limbaugh, they used to accuse us of just being mind-numb robots, just following whatever Rush Limbaugh said. Now, you think about that in a juxtaposition with what we just talked about, because we are proponents for the divine sovereign individual.
Absolutely.
But the opposition is all about the collective. Now, who's the mind-numb robot?
Oh, exactly. If you ask them to actually, have a coherent thought of their own versus just repeating whatever the slogan or the chant or the hot issue is at the moment and what they've been given, you're going to get that. They don't have anything else, and that's why logic and reason and common sense will always win the argument, because what's going to happen is they're going to resort to calling you names, and once they've done that, they've lost the argument and they have nothing else. So that's all they are. So you have won. If they resort to that, you have won the argument. So walk away.
That's it. Pretty much.
I mean, yeah, it's, but what he was hitting in there, just that whole idea. And I think it was kind of it was in there, and he was talking about it when he was talking about that professor who was, or that green or whatever, that was speaking, that, about the moral thing to limit yourself to one child. And that goes into this population theory. And that goes into harming, the population as a whole, because as we said, we're getting less people, not more.
Right.
And so is it because of things like that being said in universities and in classrooms or in lecture halls and being promoted?
It definitely is.
Yeah,
Right. One of the interesting things that I was able to live through the eyes of my son while he was going to college to become a history teacher.
Right.
And he would tell me from time to time the struggles that he had inside of his classes, because he was the one that was thinking.
Right. Actually,
everybody else, look, man, I'm just here to get my grade and I'm going to move on. Now, he said occasionally there were people, from his opposite belief system that would pipe up and say things, which is good, because that means that they're engaged, they're involved. But my son said most of the time it's just me bringing up those kind of points, and it was basically me almost against the professor.
And that is what has happened. I know with my daughter, as she went through college. Now her views are, they're her views, and she's entitled to them. We don't always agree, be it politics and other things, but sure, that's okay. Mm-hmm. We generally try to keep those out of family visits and stuff, so because we're there for fun. But views, but we, I enjoy the healthy debate sometimes, even if I don't agree with her. Mm-hmm. And that's where we differ, I think, as people, is because, as I've told others and I've told her, we can sit there and talk about it. We can discuss it. I'll get passionate, but I'm never going to get mad at you. I'm never going to be angry with you. Right. I'm just going to disagree with your opinion or your viewpoint. And we can walk away and still be friends.
Right.
Or still just agree to disagree.
Right.
And life is. And that's what's being lost. And that's what's being lost in this generation, I think, is the ability to cope, the ability to have somebody disagree with them, the ability of somebody to tell them they're wrong.
Correct.
But the professors went to your point. Yeah, you got a choice. Do I stand on principle? Do I speak up for what I know to be a certain way or believe a certain way? Or do I get my grade and go home?
Josh, he's highly opinionited to begin with, and so he can't hardly bite his tongue on those types of things.
There are others. There's out there that they just, let me get the grade, let me get my degree, and then I'll take my stance, because then I'm not sitting in this classroom where this professor runs the world, and my grade is subjective to his opinion, or his belief.
Well, I believe that happened to Josh. That I think he might have gotten a lower grade, and he'll correct me if he hears this show, but he might have gotten a lower grade because he didn't follow exactly what that professor.
Well, they will tell you what they want you to write. They will tell you what they want you to think or say in their class or on their paper or on the test.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go against that with your own opinion, well, you just tanked your grade. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that is the nature of it. And I said, and not everybody has the intestinal fortitude that Josh possesses to.
Is that what we call that?
That's a polite way of saying it. But anyway, I just think that video, I think it just really highlights kind of the overall theory, the overall thought of where our system is.
Yes.
And then you have somebody like Jordan Peterson standing against that.
Right. And he knows how to, he's passionate about it, but not only that, he has spent a lot of time digging deep down into it, drilling into these topics. And I'm not a mind-numb robot that's just going to follow everything he says, but he has the ability to articulate what I already think in such a way that I have to say, that's what I've been wanting to say, but just don't have the articulation skills to do so.
Right.
But anyway, dissent and
and I mean, what he put in there, and what we're talking about with harmers. We've already talked about Roe v. Wade, and that's, kind of a hot issue of the fact that is, we are harming to save, allegedly.
Right.
Allegedly. And
right.
But.
So let me see if I understand what you're.
Back to that.
Let me see if I understand the connection that you're trying to make there, and that is that Roe v. Wade and the pro-choice proponents, they are, or at least the ones who want to keep it in place, are thinking that there is a population problem and we need to do something about that. And I don't mean that everybody that gets an abortion is in that situation.
But
I think most people are
there is
just...
there is a faction or a portion of the supporters of that and I said, don't want to dig too far back into it, and we go all the way back to Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. We can go all the way back to that, to the anti-human movement.
Right, and they're the ones, by the way. And again, I'll point this part out is that we already know the history of Margaret Sanger and the things she's done. I don't think we've ever really talked about it much here on our show. No, we haven't done it on our show, but I mean, it's. If you've done that, you know that she was the forerunner to Planned Parenthood,
and their purpose. Planned Parenthood, I always found that name to be funny, but anyway, but the in a satirical kind of not funny way, but not funny, haha. Anyway, but yeah, she was very much eugenics, and birth control methods based on economics, based on race, based on geographical whatever, based on desirability. If you had a defect of some form or anything like that. And it goes into that anti-human movement that basically there's only a certain amount of happiness in the world, and those people take away from it.
I see. And so am I wrong that Adolf Hitler admired that in America? I've heard that before. Now, folks, I don't know that 100% because I had passed that information probably decades ago to where I heard it, I read it, I seen it on a video or whatever. I came across that, but he admired that and began to duplicate that. Now, I don't know. Again, do your own research in that area.
It sounds as plausible
Maybe
as
I shouldn't
anything
even
else.
have brought that part up, but it was there, man. It was just lodged in my brain, and it just jumped right out. But anyway,
it sounds as plausible as anything else I've heard about the guy.
Well, but knowing what he did, and knowing what she was thinking,
right? And he had people within his sphere of influence, or sphere of people that were there that were of sharing thought, kindred thought, you might say, that they probably, that was a solution to their supposed problem, or what they viewed as a problem, was here's this group of people that is causing all our problems, and we can, and looking across the water at America, where there's organizations.
We were getting rid of the useless eaters.
Right, or whatever,
And it was America that did that.
Sadly.
The infirm, they would, they would sterilize them.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we've, that's just the dark side of that. Yeah.
And a little note on that, whether you know it or whether you don't, you probably do know it. But Hillary Clinton was very proud to accept the Margaret Sanger Award.
I remember that.
So, I mean,
well,
you make your own conclusions. You draw your own connections there.
Right. And
so anyway, you were bringing up that about Roe versus Wade.
Right.
And right here toward the end of it, I just want to kind of share, a couple of things on that, which you basically have already hit that topic, but I'm gonna share just that highlighted section through there where it was talking about Roe was egregiously wrong from the start, and it is time to heed the Constitution. Ooh, that's not a good thing, is it?
They don't like that.
I heard people say that's not good. That's
pesky Constitution,
ragged
old thinking.
Thing.
It's not up to date.
Right. So anyway, it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. And it goes on to say that the permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved like most important questions in our democracy, which is really a representative democracy, by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting on the issue. If you have a problem with it one way or the other, so there again, you're taking away anybody's ability to dissent by taking it and making it a federal issue.
Right, and they bring it down when it talks about sending it back to the state or to the representatives. They're talking about at the state level because, down here on the state level, at the local level, your elected leaders live in your community.
That's
they
correct.
may shop at the same place you shop, or go to the same place of church worship service that you go to, or they run a business in your town or whatever. So you can have some direct face-to-face conversation with this person,
right?
Versus a government or an official in a far-off, distant land, which, by the way, is what the Revolutionary War was about, was being ruled from distant leaders and unfair things there with that. But, that was the gist of that, is to put it back to where it should have been, which was the states. And I will note that the Democrats that are in power, that are in majority of the Senates and Congress, tried to codify Roe v. Wade just this last week. They tried to codify. They tried to vote it in. The House instead of the Senate tried to Senate, and it failed. And so, hurrah! Hats off to people standing on their principles and standing on.
Let's keep it constitutional.
Right.
How about that?
And I
regardless
think
on which side you fall on.
And I really think that's why it didn't pass, was the fact that, they didn't want this to be held at that level, or that they understood that no matter what side of the argument you may fall on, the fact is that there's nowhere. The fact the Constitution is the exact opposite. The Constitution is about the right to life, and it's about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
We find these things to be self-evident.
Right. And so, if in our independence, if in our declaring documents of our country, the right, life is the first thing that's among the inalienable rights.
Right.
Well, then how can you have a law that goes the exact opposite of that?
Correct.
So
that's a good point.
And something that I brought up to you in conversation, I think, and I know I've seen, is we have laws that protect endangered birds and their eggs. It's a federal offense, a federal crime to touch a swallow's unborn eggs. But yet we've got laws the exact opposite for humans.
Interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
Yeah, think about that. How did Jordan Peterson say? You should think about that for at least a year, buddy.
Right. Put that one in your pipe and smoke it a little while.
Right.
Yeah. But, it's just the absurdity of where the environmental movement, now don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-birds. And I know what a swallow is. I lived in Southern California for a while, and, they're, cool. Great. I don't want them harmed either. But when the laws protecting animals are stronger or act in exact opposition to laws protecting humans, we've got a serious issue. Yeah.
Right, a conflict of interest.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But moving on.
Right. So moving on, and we need to go ahead and tie this into, what's going on with the food supply, you know, because this, the whole thing was, about the overpopulation theory and how it's related to the food shortages.
Right.
And so one of our favorite spooky people.
Yeah, one of our favorite contributors to the show.
Right, is none other than Klaus Schwab.
Klaus.
Yeah, I probably butcher that name every time I say it.
I was about to say something. I'll digress. So leave it alone.
But let's just hear from our dear leader.
History is truly at a turning point. We do not yet know the full extent and the systemic and structural changes which will happen. However, we do know that global energy systems, food systems, and supply chains will be deeply affected.
Why?
In times of crisis,
I'll answer that later.
The role of governments is more important and more relevant than ever. What is also needed is a summit like this one to go beyond crisis management and to look into constructive ways we can build our common future. Our futures are intrinsically connected to one another, as the profound challenges to mankind, such as climate change, are globally interconnected and require collaborative responses. In conclusion, and despite all the challenges, we have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation, and which we can only fulfill through collaboration on a national and on a global level. I wish you an impactful and successful meeting.
So
the Klaus had a lot to say there.
Right.
In a short sentence or two.
Right. I mean, either A, he really believes all this tripe, about global warming and climate change and probably overpopulation. I've not heard him say that specifically, but that's all part of the same ilk.
And I find it interesting that he comes from the most populated country in Europe, the European Union, and that is Germany.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the interesting things that I think that he was saying is that basically when he said, well, we're all interconnected.
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
Collaborative.
Yeah. And that we needed to do collaborative and all of those things. Well, what are all of those things saying? They're saying that, this is of the collective, by the collective.
And for the collective.
So my question is where is the sovereign or the divine sovereign individual in any of these statements or the rights of them? Oh, no. We can't do that.
He don't count.
Right. We can't. We can't afford to. We can't afford to protect the rights of all the divine sovereign individuals because we've got a global crisis.
Right. We've got a global crisis.
Right. It's time for us to pull together. Yeah. And yet we have another crisis that's really going on and everybody's feeling it and everybody can know it without any doubt. Every time they go to the gas pump, every time they go to the grocery store, they see it. Right. And especially the mothers who are having problems finding baby formula right now. They can see that. And what are they doing for that crisis on a collective basis?
Right. Well, that's just small. It's just part of it, I guess. I mean, and I don't know where you going to.
Yeah, I'm going to go on with some of the
well,
things.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you really pay close attention to the key words that they use in there, the key phrases. It's all about that. And if as we like to joke, no humans were harmed in the making of this show.
That's right. No humans were harmed in the production of this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Right. So anyway, and then wanted to go on over to another headline over here where Goya Foods CEO warns we're on the precipice of a global food crisis. And I'm not going to break down all the things in this particular article. He goes on and talks about even Schwab is warning of the global crisis. I mean, it's not a joke. I think everybody's already on board with the fact that this is a real thing, even if they don't really understand truly why it's happening. It's, by the way, it's not just Ukraine. All right.
No. It's,
and it wasn't something that the last president did,
Right.
And so,
it's, it kind of leads, you talk about that. It's not an accident. It wasn't this global crisis or this crisis that we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the real question I've always asked is, why are we in a global crisis?
Right.
Now, you say, well, COVID-19 or, in the pandemic and, all these things and climate change and all the war in Ukraine or whatever the latest distraction is,
mm-hmm.
But I'm going to reference an article that I found in the Federalist, and it was by a guy named, or gal, I don't remember, Joy Pullman. It says supply chain disruptions are not an accident. They're the logical result of stupid lockdowns.
Right. I mean, it's so many. I mean, come on. You got to know this.
I mean, it's
you can't blame it on so many other thousands of things. And I'm going to let you go on because it may say what's on my mind right now. I'm going to let you go.
It really does. I think a couple things. I want to hit these real quick.
Okay.
We can kind of comment real quick. One of the comments. No, the cowardly politicians who enabled foolish and unprecedented lockdowns do not deserve to blame the results on anything but themselves.
And that's a good point.
And these supply chain disruptions, as everyone is aware, painfully aware, are doing everything from starving babies, shooting up the price of everything. 8.3% annual inflation number affirmed again. They're not random. It's not the virus's fault. They're the direct and foreseeable consequence of ill-advised global lockdowns that nearly all of our nation's political leaders refused to take into account when they and the corporate media colluded to gaslight the world into accepting them.
Yep.
It's not happenstance.
Right.
It's cowardly, ignorant, and just plain malevolent leadership throughout the entire COVID era. And there's a lot of people in that. They never needed to happen, is this person's opinion, and I kind of tend to agree.
I agree.
Based on faulty models, and the information age doesn't change their supply chain consequences alone, as well as the medical and social consequences, should be enough evidence for rational people to conclude we must never, ever lock down again. Now, you referenced earlier, and we were talking about a January 2021 study.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to hit that.
Well, this article actually referenced
it in
the study, a scientific study.
And it basically sounded, and he's got the study there right there on the line.
From the European Journal of Clinical Investigation. Yeah. And I'm not going to go through everything and just bore you with all the details and everything. I'm just going to go to the conclusion of this investigation. And it says, while small benefits cannot be excluded, we do not find significant benefits on case growth of more restrictive NPIs, and NPI stands for non-pharmaceutical interventions. In other words, things like lockdowns, masks, and all of that kind of stuff. And it says that similar reductions in case growth may be achievable with less restrictive interventions. And that was the conclusion of this study out of the European Journal of Clinical Investigations.
Well, just the simple fact is it didn't significantly reduce anything. And there are some studies that actually came out and said that it caused
yes,
more.
That's correct. Yeah.
This article goes on to say, and I have to agree with this, reality is it's impossible to just hit pause on an economy. Millions of unforeseen effects. Phrase people are using to summarize these: a butterfly effect, supply chain issues. I'm going to read an example. I'm going to go ahead and read this because it's kind of cool. And because
is it on the same one, same article?
It's right there. Said, now imagine you're an executive down at the fictitious TP supplier Wipe World. The call comes in for the
paper, that is.
Yeah, toilet paper. The great toilet paper caper.
Right.
The call comes in for the shutdown, and you have some serious decisions to make. Production managers at the big roll mill, your supplier for industrial reams of toilet paper, have shut down and will eventually furlough most of the staff. Your shipping contracts will go into default. Trucks with slabs of TP rolls tightly wrapped and ready to be dispensed will be called back or even mothballed. The proverbial target of your product is about to hit the fan. I love his writing.
Yeah.
So a national shutdown leads to a run on toilet paper. I seem to recall such a thing.
I remember.
Yeah. Caused by a sudden drop in at-work wiping, leading to massive manufacturing rework, supply chain shifts, and a janitorial staff forced to walk the halls of vacated buildings like Jack Torrance from The Shining, simulating a proxy population doing their business to keep everything from falling apart. Kind of a hyperbole to a point,
right?
But it shows the
right and
the ridiculousness of it, and I mean,
scare the population to death so that we so we can lock down the greatest economy in the world and screw up everybody's lives.
He goes on to say that, it's an insane complexity of anybody knows anything about making anything or any type of cooperative activity. Pausing an entire society is entirely impossible and idiotic to even suggest.
Yeah.
Yet they did. The pause will always have its own effects, and make a restart really complicated and possibly never even able to occur. And it's visible in the labor market, dampening working age Americans' willingness to work. There's help wanted signs everywhere, bro. I mean, we've seen this.
Absolutely.
And yet another record high
Don't tell
number,
me you can't get a job today.
And then record high, able-bodied, working-age people refusing to fill positions.
Exactly.
And stimulus hush money is what they wrote into that, perpetuated those powers. But so did the insane panic and refusal to tell the truth that most working-age people were not at risk from contracting COVID. So did the lockdowns, which, like masks, not used as a health tool, but as a manipulation tool to frighten and control people. It's going to have effects that can never fully be undone, deepening distrust of authorities, public institutions. And, it's, they go on. I mean, he just, all it would have taken was a few more courageous leaders or a less demonic press to protect the American people from responding to a natural disaster with an even bigger man-made disaster. So it says Americans are punishing themselves by suffering 10 times what was in store if we'd have just followed common sense.
Right.
And that's this guy's opinion. I mean, I don't disagree with him.
And I'll say this about Trump. Even he said it. He said that the cure can't be worse than the disease. But that's what we're finding out over time. And I mean, look, you can't shut down the economy of the entire globe. And don't tell me, because I knew it the moment they did it. I said, you can't do this.
Right.
In my own head, I knew it was common sense that you can't do this. And when they said 2 weeks, and I'm like,
yeah, that just didn't wash. That didn't wash.
I might go with that one, but this is not. I mean, I knew deep down in my being that that's not right.
Right.
You can't do that.
It didn't pass the sniff test when it came out. I mean, really.
Right.
And I like what he says here, and this is the last I'm going to say with it. He says we need to stop calling them supply chain issues.
Absolutely.
And call them lockdown consequences.
And that's exactly what it is. It's right now what we're suffering is lockdown consequences, but they'll never admit it.
Right. And that's the absolute truth. And A, if that's what it is, and B, they will never admit it.
That's it.
And I mean,
bingo. You got it.
You see what we're talking about. You see where we were going here with this supply chain stuff. This has been, I mean, yes, COVID-19 is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it has consequences. I've had COVID. You've had COVID. We know it's a real thing. But it did not warrant shutting down an entire globe, much less the strongest economic engine that has ever been created.
Right. And it makes you wonder for those people who are afraid of population, well, wouldn't that have given them exactly what they wanted as a decreased population if it would have been as bad as all their predictive models have been?
Oh, right. Right.
I mean, I'm just being a conspiracy theorist here.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
But it's just fun to play.
We're part of the Tin Hat Society. It's okay. But, it's just really there. And I think this kind of leads on to... at the end of the day, the question we always ask, what can we do about it?
Yep. What can we do about it? And ladies and gentlemen, there are some things that we need to do about this. Each one of us needs to prepare ourselves for unexpected things. We say it at the end of every show now is, prepare for the unexpected and keep it local. And some of the things, and I mean, it's common sense things. I mean, we're not telling you things that you probably haven't heard of or anything, but, grow your own food.
That's it. Gardening on your own land. Right. If you have a little space, that's something that you'll see some stuff later, not this episode, but coming out that I'm doing that myself. I've jumped into this. We're doing a little backyard gardening, and it doesn't take up very much space. In fact, we've got ours in pots, and didn't even have to get a tiller.
Very low square footage.
Very little square footage.
Yeah.
And so I mean, you don't have to have. And I even, in the video that's come out, if you got a balcony and you got some sun, and you can put some pots out there. You can grow a tomato plant, or you can grow something. You can grow something. I mean, it's little things, and it seems like, well, what's a tomato plant going to do? Well, it's tomatoes, and it's money you didn't have to spend, and you grew them.
Yeah.
And, but there are some who believe, growing things that you might not even care about eating that somebody else might want.
Right.
And,
And I'll just say on that is that for every food item, even if it's a single tomato that grows on that vine, is just one more thing that takes the control out of the people's hands.
Oh, absolutely.
Over our food supply and our independence, our divine individual. No, it's divine sovereign individualism. Okay, I'll get that down.
We messed up.
I like that new thing. I like that new saying that I've come across with
DSI, divine sovereign individual.
Right.
And so, I mean, and you're thinking, well, I live in a city, I don't have any land.
Right.
I don't even,
a lot of people in that situation.
Right. Well, talk to a person that may know a person, or you may know that, especially in this plus, elderly folks that used to garden, they used to grow a garden, be it a small one or whatever. They used to grow it, but they can't anymore for health reasons or whatever. But they've got a head full of knowledge on how to grow things.
Right. And if they could, they would.
And they will willingly, I promise you, willingly share that information. But if you'll talk to them, a kind of a cooperative where you're using their space, you're doing the labor and the work, they're providing the land and the guidance.
Right.
And you split the
right. You share some of those.
You share the
crops.
Rewards.
Right. And everybody wins.
Right. And so, I mean, that's an option that's out there. One that we're going to hit down later on down the road a little more deep, guerrilla gardening.
Yeah, I want to kind of understand that a little bit better. But yeah, guerrilla gardening. Can you just give us like a one sentence explanation?
Basically, it's
what that is.
It's just planting things where there's available space.
So in other words, if there's like
a park bench,
beside a park bench,
right? There's a space of grass, or like a business facility or some type of like a hospital or something that has
but they have growing space there, and
they're not using it.
They're not using it.
Now, the extreme side is like literally you just like planting stuff wherever you find some grass.
Sure, like Johnny Appleseed.
I mean, pretty much you're just planting something and there it is. I mean, that's the far outside. And it sounds funny when I first heard it. I was like, but if you live in a city, why not?
Right. I mean, plant it everywhere. Somebody can eat.
Well,
even if it's an animal.
I don't know if you've been. You've been to big cities. You see what's laying around on the ground most of the time. Nobody's going to pay attention to a plant that you planted.
Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, none if they do. Albeit, but
right. If you're next to the homeless community, they might probably reach over there and grab them.
They're probably going to have some. But point being is that there's if there's an available piece of dirt or a place you can put a potted plant. I mean, you can put it in a pot and make it look decorative, so it's enhancing to the environment around it. But you get, you're going to grow from it.
Right.
And that's just one thing.
So, and we may be getting this out of order, but I would say that probably the number one thing that you should be focusing on right now is buying and storing some food.
Oh, absolutely.
That's already done.
And that's the quickest.
And it could be what bridges you between whatever happens, unexpected things that happen, and being able to get a plan together and to maybe implement that plan and get you some food.
Right. I mean, one of them, like you said, prepackaged foods, rice and beans, ramen.
Simple things.
Ramen noodles, tuna. There's a lot of things, but if it's got a long shelf life and it don't take up a lot of space, and a lot of those things are actually cheap. Yeah. I mean, they don't cost a lot of money. Even with the price inflation, they're cheap. Right. And you just stick it up and you just put it back, and you've got it for a rainy day. And like you said, things happen, But now the biggest thing, and we will promote this and push this continuously every episode, and that's getting involved locally.
Yeah.
Farmers markets.
Keep it local.
Keep it local. Your food banks. Now you say, well, I don't need help with that. But, you can volunteer down. I mean, you've talked about this. A lot of times, the volunteers, there's stuff that they just weren't able to get rid of.
Right.
And they're going to throw it away.
Friends. I mean, look, if I was a farmer, And I had product at the end of it. I mean, even if I could have given it to somebody else, you've become friends. They know you're volunteering there. Who knows what's going to happen.
Right.
But people are just good-hearted. That's all I'm saying.
They are.
And so get to know these people,
and that's
volunteer.
Right. The more you get involved in your community, the more you get involved with people around your community.
Yeah. Same thing with food banks, by the way.
Right. Well, exactly. The more you get involved with that, the more connections you have, the more options you have.
Right.
And people will, farmers are funny, gardeners are funny. They usually grow way more than they can consume.
Sure.
And some sell it, some give it away.
That's true.
Just to get rid of it because they've grown more than they can ever.
Well, I mean, who likes throwing good food away?
Right. And they usually do because they want people to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing, another thing, and it's really got nothing to do with food, but it does, and that's social media. Getting out there with social media groups, getting out there, forming a group of people that trade or co-op or whatever with things, but, using these tools to our benefit.
Right. Use our technology
right
to feed ourselves.
Well, exactly. To resource.
Social media,
socialize, and resource.
Right.
But that's really just kind of some things real quick, just hitting them, not spending a lot of time on them, that, we can all do. I said a lot of the things on here I've already begun to do myself just because, I got to practice what I preach and talk about. And so that's the way that I've chose to go about it. So, just kind of there's some things, folks, to say there it is.
Right. So I guess we better kind of get things wrapped up here.
Yeah, I think so. We probably bored them to death. We did a little longer than we didn't hit it quite as fast as we thought. We try, folks. We do.
We really do.
But anyway, so yeah, I guess kind of the closing thoughts are, and you got to ask yourselves this: are the politicians and unelected officials of our own government and other countries weaponizing science to achieve an ideological outcome?
Yeah.
I mean, they continue to go down the path of climate change policies. It's harmful to our industries, our food producers, our supply chain. And no matter which side you fall on, stop waiting for them to make the right choices.
Right.
They're not going to. Reports are saying as early as this fall, we could see increased food shortages. So, what are you going to do to prepare? And I mean, that's really the thing. And in this episode, we dug into the overpopulation theory, some of its history, a little brief bit, arguments against it, which, were logical, I thought. We also spoke on the idea of weaponizing science and about the impending food shortages. We gave you some practical tips to help you toward food independence. And as future episodes are put out for your learning and consumption, we will continue to uncover the truth, show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. The biggest thing we can do is realize that it will take us all to stop this and protect our families and communities. And we hope we're providing you information that is helpful to you and entertaining as well. Please tell your friends and family and tune in. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio and Spotify. Just search for the Farm to Table Direct Show. That is the Farm, the number 2 Table Direct Show. You can check us out on, we are on Rumble. It's the Farm to Table Direct Show. You can check us out, our hot takes on our YouTube channel, the Farm to Table Direct Show. Email us at farmtotabledirect@protonmail.com. Or you can visit our website, the farmtotabledirect.show.com. But until the next episode, prepare for the unexpected
and keep it local.